some of you guys may have seen on Twitter, or may not have, as is probably the case, there was recently a tweet made by a furry member of the community who had spoken out against the Furpocalypse theme, which this year was Haunted Asylum, essentially feeling a little bit bitter, or I guess bitter is not really the right word here, feeling a bit offended by the fact that they would use a very horrific part of history, that being the insane asylums that were very prevalent across a number of countries, essentially to represent the horror theme of the con. Now, I'm going to come here from a neutral stance because while I fully understand how that could very, very easily offend someone, I am also a die-hard American Horror Story fan, and Asylum was one of my favorite seasons. So it's a bit hard for me to go too strongly in one way or the other, so let's look at why this might be offensive. So, from my point of view and my perspective here, I'm a massive American Horror Story fan. Like I mentioned previously, I love the Asylum storyline, and some of the other storylines that they featured in the show have been a little on the edgier side. Just in case you are not familiar, they did a season on a haunted house, witches, asylum, a haunted hotel vampire thing. They did a spin-off of the Roanoke Incident, and it's looking like this season is going to be a mix of clowns and everything that would make a tryptophobic scream. So they kind of run the full gamut. Now there's this very clear difference here, though, in the way that American Horror Story approaches asylums and the way that Furpocalypse has approached asylums. Now, while mental asylums have been a very, very popular trope among many movies, TV shows, what have you, one of the really key factors here when you are portraying an insane asylum is your interpretation of the asylum itself. Now, with American Horror Story, while it is an insane asylum, there are other factors going around. There are a lot of religious characters in there. They have an instance of the devil. Spoilers, basically one of the nurses becomes the devil, and while it is talking about an insane asylum, the insane asylum serves more as a setting rather than the main theme, and is essentially host to some hypocrisy between religion and the practices of the insane asylum. And rather than make it a spooky movie where people with mental disorders are scary, it's really more meant to be a set piece. It's not essentially the entire focus. Now, asylums have also appeared in other mediums. You see in Arkham Asylum in Batman, that is essentially where all the bad people are housed because they're insane or have mutant powers or want to do harm to the different community members of Gotham. And in other settings, you see asylums as creepy, spooky places. What you'll see with a lot of the ghost hunters or, found footage people who like to go to these, abandoned asylums and take videos is that they are essentially going there to experience ghosts who have endured the really horrific practices of the asylum that was there before. We've seen references to lobotomies and shock treatment. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest also takes place in the asylum and goes into some of that. Essentially, what asylums are being used for there is they've been typically portrayed as a inherently negative place or as a set piece for a more developed plotline. Now, this is where Furpocalypse and more of the traditional media diverges. Because unlike an Arkham Asylum, where it's a fictional place and it's basically standing in the place of a prison, or American Horror Story, where it's essentially a set piece, or even in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, where it's taking a more introspective look into asylums, essentially for Furpocalypse, it is a theme. And that's the point of a theme. So when they went to hand out badges with different name designations, such as, shock therapist, patient, lobotomy technician, I can understand why people got a little rubbed the wrong way. Understandably, essentially the core function of a lot of these insane asylums were to house what were considered mentally ill people. And whereas today, people with mental disorders such as schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, or other major mental issues are sent to psychiatric facilities who can actually give them the proper medication and attention that they need, insane asylums didn't necessarily do that. It demonized these people and saw their conditions as inherently bad or evil or unwanted, and whereas a psychiatric ward is essentially trying to mentally fix or remedy or treat a condition, some of the treatments that were used back in insane asylums were what we'd consider very inhumane today. Now, that being said, I can understand why the theme is very attractive. With popular TV shows like American Horror Story and video games like Silent Hill and TV shows like Gotham, where asylums do appear, or at least different facets of asylums and mental disorder as being a negative, do feature very, very primarily. It can be seen as like the spooky unknown, and there is nothing more terrifying than the inner workings of our own brain. So I understand that aspect, as it is a genuinely scary theme. Now, something to keep in mind here is with furries, you have to remember from one of my previous videos that we do tend to over-index in certain categories, and people with certain mental, I won't say issues, but certain mental proclivities may feel a little bit alienated here. People who are living with bipolar disorder or autism or any form of mental disorder may feel a bit offended by this, because it's essentially taking the history of people like them and how they were treated before modern medicine caught up to what their brains were doing and glorifying it as a funny theme. So I can understand why people got mad. But by the same token, I can also understand why Furpocalypse thought it would be a very interesting theme to use this year. Now, where does this get a little bit wonky? So, understandably, I can see where some furries would get upset, but I think what's really causing the rift here is how Furpocalypse handled the incident. So, rather than give people a free forum to discuss what they thought about the theme and kind of give their input to help shape the theme in a way that would perhaps be more inclusive, accepting, or, help the community kind of come together on a more creative output, what Furpocalypse did is they actually rescinded the registration of one member who spoke out against it and caused a bit of a PR shitstorm, eventually explaining their stance, but not really apologizing to the members that they had affected by essentially rescinding registration to. And while I fully understand that they did not want to have these people that wanted to speak out against their theme present, I think this was a huge miss on their part. As someone who works in marketing and PR, typically the worst thing you can do when there is a bit of a kerfuffle is to delete the problem away, to block the problem away, or to ban the problem away. You don't ever want to alienate someone who does feel that, your brand has kind of left them by the wayside. The person who was actually speaking out against the theme did seem like they had attended this convention in the past, and quite frankly, had they been given a little bit more of a personal treatment, may have eventually attended and been able to deal with the theme this year. However, just carte blanche blocking them and refunding their registration is not only a bit immature, but it's not advised. Why is that? So in previous instances where either a brand or an event has had public outrage at a certain aspect, most of the time the brand or the event will work with the community to remedy what is being seen as offensive, not acceptable, or just genuinely not okay. Some pretty good examples of this are different festivals have actually banned Native American headdresses when it has been felt to be a little bit offensive to Native cultures. You've had certain events block clothing that promotes drug use in communities where they really don't want that to be the center focus. And in this case, if you are a person who has people in your family who have been subjected to the horrors of the insane asylum years that were active on Earth, yeah, seeing lobotomized nurse batches when maybe your great-great-grandfather or great-great-great-great-great-grandmother had been in an asylum and regularly abused by medical professionals, that may be a trigger, and it may be very, very offensive. So something that the con could have done was provided an open forum, or perhaps provided a Google form to let people air their grievances, and worked with the community to resolve essentially what was causing the issue, or just alter your theme. Instead of doing an insane asylum, which, yeah, given our proclivity for mental disorders in the community, could be seen as a bit offensive, maybe try to alter it in a way that is a bit more inclusive and a little bit less trigger-inducing, but still embraces everything that we love about the horror genre. Now, was I myself offended? No. Like I said, I honestly love American Horror Story Asylum and all of the other iterations, and the way that it was done in that particular show kind of used it as a set piece. It did not use it as a very abusive look at people with mental disorders. Sure, you have people there with mental disorders, but they weren't being exploited for the purpose of the plot. Similarly, Furpocalypse was not looking to exploit people with mental disorders for the purpose of their con. They were looking at a horror trope and maybe just jumped into it a little too fast without understanding how some of the community might have felt. There have been plenty of instances like this. Say, for instance, I wanted to have a furry convention, and I wanted to have a cops versus robbers theme inspired by my childhood and playing cops versus robbers as a kid. Now, some of you are probably looking at me with a very strange face, but if you grew up in America with family members who were a little bit more conservative in, like, say, the 1950s or 60s, cops versus robbers doesn't seem inherently that triggering. What we have to consider is, in today's society, we don't really have that narrative anymore. We have incidences like Ferguson and the LA riots, and incidences where cops versus robbers has kind of been skewed by the way that we think of robbers and the way that we think of cops. The Black Lives Matter movement has changed a lot of the way that we think about the bad guys, and some of the hidden body camera incidences have changed how we've thought about the good guys. It's not a clear-cut line anymore, so to use a theme like that would be wrong. Similarly, the insane asylum theme may not inherently seem bad. What we have to take into account is what we've learned about the insane asylum industry as it was in the past, and some of the horrors we've uncovered as we've learned more in the future. Is it a good theme? Yeah, I would probably attend Furpocalypse if I had the means to, but do I understand why people were offended? Yes, I fully understand it. I may not necessarily agree with it, but I can fully understand why they were upset. Do I think the way that Furpocalypse handled it with the con-goers who spoke out against it was right? No. I think the way they handled it was wholly immature and very, very ill-advised, and had I been on their PR team, I would have strongly advised for a different solution. Hopefully, Furpocalypse will learn from this in the future, and if future themes do upset patrons, they will work with patrons to find resolutions, rather than going for a stricter option that really doesn't let the community that enjoys them so much have a say. Anyways, this has been a quick look at a brief instance in furry drama history, and I hope you've enjoyed it. Okay, bye! So you'd think that would be the end of it. Well, so did I, and I was going to finish this video and put it up, but actually, recently, Furpocalypse has decided to, I guess, take a bit better of an approach to the whole thing. There's obviously some things here that can still be worked on a lot, like the fact that their logo is still in a straitjacket, but some really cool positives that I've actually seen them take steps with are releasing a follow-up letter to their original letter for patrons and offering generic badges to those who really don't want the more themed badges that say patient or lobotomy technician or anything that, they just don't feel okay with. And that's great. That's actually a really great step by them. It's always a great option to just give everyone a little bit more of an option there to have something less offensive that they feel more okay wearing. It's a good move on their part. The person that had mentioned getting banned by the con, I believe, has been unbanned. It's been lifted, or at least that is what public discourse has been saying. And apparently they may or may not still be blocked by Twitter. I don't really know if they've been blocked from the Furpocalypse account, but at the very least, they could, if they wanted to, attend now, I believe, and that part should be resolved. Obviously, there are still some people who are kind of upset that it took this long for this to happen, or are kind of mad that it happened in the first place, but you have to give Furpocalypse some props here, because I wasn't particularly nice in most of the video leading up to this little end bit here, and I was fully expecting them, like most other events who've kind of taken this hardline stance, to just go, screw it. But it looks like they took a minute to reflect, which is really, really great. And honestly, I could not be happier that, they are taking the fandom's, unique point of view into consideration here and trying to be a little bit more accepting, and that's great. I'm really, really happy for them. So now that that's happened, I feel a bit better about the whole situation. Okay, just kidding. One more note. So, obviously, what I've spoken about has been very contested, at least on Twitter, in the last couple of days. So, one thing that I would actually love is Furpocalypse. If you watched this, which you may have, you may not have, I don't know. But if you are watching this and you have anything that you would like to add to the discussion or any insight that I may have missed, I fully welcome you to reach out to me at ragehound@gmail.com. I will put it up on the screen so you can see it very clearly. And give me your thoughts and any corrections to anything I may have gotten wrong in this episode. Because from proximity, you're extremely close to me, I would love to attend a Furpocalypse in the future. This year just wasn't in the cards because financial reasons and also scheduling reasons. I literally can't take that week off. So, I honestly hope I have not offended any of your sensibilities. With most of these episodes, I like to take as neutral a stance as I physically can. So, understandably, it still may have upset some viewers, including you guys. So if you have anything to add to what I have on this video, I fully welcome you to reach out and let me know. I would totally appreciate you guys chiming in here. I obviously only have access to what I can find on the internet in regards to what you guys posted, tweets I've seen, and messages I've received from friends. But understandably, with what limited resources I have, I might not have gotten the whole picture. Maybe there's something I didn't know about the person who was banned, and maybe there's some facts that I'm just blatantly missing because I just don't have access to them. So if you have anything to add to this discussion, please let me know. I would love to have an update on this, and even if you guys want to have an interview, speak about this, or just let your voice be heard and have a platform, totally open to that. I understand that you guys are probably gearing up for Furpocalypse right now, so now may not be the best time, but after the event, if you guys want to connect and kind of give your 2 cents, I'm here, and I am always listening. And while I am a bit delayed on several videos, I will more than happily give you guys the time of day, because this is a two-way discussion, and it would be, quite frankly, improper of me not to give you guys a chance to speak in this matter. Alright, thank you.